All right, you can see that it's recording up top, correct?
Yes.
Okay, now I'm going to pause it.
I was the 6th director in 7 years, with 3 of the previous directors being interim. Staff knowledge and competency had also been lost through staff retirements, staff reassignments. Most notably for this presentation, and most impactfully, the head of acquisitions had been removed from their role and reassigned elsewhere in the organisation. The position had not been replaced. Instead, there had been a distribution of responsibilities to provide oversight to acquisitions work and acquisition staff. I can make no comment on the validity of those organizational decisions because I was not there at the time, but it set an environment where the division was in a position of playing catch up with knowledge and skills in the acquisitions area. To add one more piece to the context, we had a looming ILS migration in front of us. So being able to understand our existing workflows and translate them from Millennium, our then ILS, to a new system was a priority for us going forward. So that background sets up our many ongoing efforts to play catch up in our acquisitions knowledge. When we first started our focus on acquisitions work, we had no new positions available to us to bring in skills and knowledge. And I think that situation of no new positions or positions not being filled after staff leave are unfortunately a common scenario that many of us have seen in our workplaces. And it will no doubt be increasing right now with most of us in hiring freezes due to COVID economic impacts. So without new positions, it was a matter of working with the existing division roles, skills and aptitudes and look for ways to utilize the staff we had and ask them to step into roles and learn and lead. We had library technician staff who did the day-to-day work and had been doing so for many years. They had a routine of procedures that they carried out, but they struggled to articulate the acquisitions knowledge behind those procedures. They just followed routine. So it was a priority to get consistent, knowledgeable leadership over those functions and to support our staff in their work so we could review what we were doing in acquisitions, fully understand our processes and workflows, and be better placed for that looming ILS migration. Although some acquisitions oversight responsibilities had been redistributed when the head of acquisitions was reassigned, those staff did not necessarily feel they were best suited to that work. And I wanted to look across the division for all potential options rather than just focusing on the existing assignments and structure in place. My goal when doing this was to look for staff that had skills or exhibited the potential to acquire them, and staff who had expressed interest and enthusiasm for new responsibilities based on their work to date. So things we looked for were, had they stepped in and led a project or committee? Had they developed new workflows, learned a new skill? Were they existing supervisors? Were they good communicators? Basically, anything that would be a pointer that would indicate a proactive approach to expanding their knowledge and the ability to communicate well and manage staff. I worked with my department heads to identify these staff, worked with the interested individuals to set goals and priorities so that adding new responsibilities wouldn't be overwhelming, and then we enacted an organizational restructure to support the new assignments. The resulting organizational structure to support this change is shown here, with monographic acquisitions and serials and e-resource acquisitions split across different departments and supervisors. So the two departments that ACK functions were split across were the Continuing Resources and Collections Department, or CRAC, as we called it, which pulls serials and e-resource functions into one department, and the Resource Acquisitions, Sharing and Digital Scholarship, or RADS department. This department was focused on acquiring materials that have no ongoing costs. The digital scholarship and monographic acquisitions combination is a strange one perhaps, but we had to go this route as we were lacking in basic monographic acquisitions knowledge, and head of digital scholarship had some interest and experience in this area, along with good management skills to bring the department together. This structure allowed us to align responsibilities with staff who felt better able to manage them. We're a relatively small division and we didn't have anyone who could be a head of acquisitions, but we had staff willing to work with these structures and these responsibilities. So you manage with the hand you have, and we worked in this direction. So how did it all work? How were staff supported, and how did we assess if things were working or needed change? What takeaways from our experience can we share? As anyone would expect, we did hit roadblocks and challenges, most notably in the RADS department with the monographic acquisitions work. Skills seemed harder to develop than originally thought, and training and support didn't seem enough to get us there. Staff were supported through webinars, conferences, and encouraged to reach out to colleagues at other institutions to ask questions and information seek. But the challenge is that you don't know what you don't know. So it was more of a reactive, iterative learning process, responding to issues and questions and using those as a jumping off point for training and learning. This was a sound way to move forward, but was slow and inevitably led to frustrations, both for those in the position of oversight, feeling that they were on a never-ending learning curve, and for those who reported to them, who felt that a supervisor should be able to answer all of their questions. So we found ourselves hitting a brick wall with progress in monographic acquisitions. And although I think the decision to distribute responsibilities across staff who seemed to possess the skills and aptitude to learn was the right one, and in fact was the only option I had, I recognize that you can't know how someone will function in a role until they are in it. Enthusiasm and interest are assets that should never be ignored, but they may not be enough, and skills and aptitudes that a staff member exhibited in one area might not always translate. Staff who might have been effective supervisors in an area of their strength found it much harder supervising when they felt they were on the back foot, not being able to answer questions from their staff and support them effectively. I do want to take a moment and talk about the ILS migration. It was a positive and a negative. It was a massive change and one that needed preparation and knowledge of functional areas to enable a smooth transition. So it was there as this haunting specter hanging over many of the decisions we made. But it also offered an opportunity for learning together. The migration broke things apart and we had to put workflows back together in a new system and learn the new system together from the ground up. One important topic that I want to touch upon is how do you recognize when something isn't working and it's time to make a change? Change takes time, new skills take time, so how do you decide a time frame for a learning curve and how do you judge what can be achieved in that time frame? I don't have a magic answer on this one. Obviously, the most important and most obvious is outcomes. If the articulated goals of skill development and knowledge growth aren't being achieved, and that manifests itself in work errors, inability to fully address questions from subject selectors or supervisees, then something isn't working. Additionally, staff had stepped up to take on these new responsibilities. So were there other responsibilities suffering? Were services and support in other areas being significantly impacted as staff tried to develop and learn new skills? Obviously, we worked with the staff who took on new responsibilities to adjust existing goals and priorities in their other areas. This was essential so staff didn't feel overwhelmed or under-supported in learning their new roles. But if the essentials of their other tasks were being adversely impacted, then something wasn't working right. Also, it was important to understand how the staff involved felt about their trajectory. If they saw things in a positive light and felt that they were moving forward and learning, then we continued on and discussed learning curves and how best to support them and get them where they need, get them what they need, and get them there faster. If they felt it wasn't going well, that they weren't able to grasp the new elements of their role, that confidence and motivation were slipping, then we took a hard look at how to support staff in that situation and whether more encouragement and support would help or if it was best to accept things weren't working. And in a couple of cases, in discussion with a staff member and department head, we agreed that things weren't working. So rather than kill someone's motivation and self-worth, we moved on because they were valuable members to the team and they wanted to stay the course with us. We just had to realign their job duties back to what they were. So I'm now going to hand it over to my colleagues to talk about where we are now with acquisitions and the work of the acquisitions unit.
Thank you, Annette. I won't go into all the details of each and every change we made along the way, but over time we saw some staff departures that allowed us to pull together a new position, and this offered us the opportunity to create a new lead acquisitions librarian role. This slide shows the organizational chart. Under this role, we have been able to bring in experience and skills, and this has allowed us to create a unified, cohesive acquisitions unit. Having all acquisition functions under one umbrella provides a single point of contact for the rest of the libraries And although the workflows of monographs and e-resource acquisitions may be different, there are converging points around budget management, ILS use, and interaction with campus purchasing. Once the decision was made to create a new acquisitions unit, the key issue was finding the right person with the appropriate experience and characteristics to lead the change. It was important to hire a person with knowledge of issues, trends, and best practices in the area of acquisitions. Since this person would be leading change, we also wanted a candidate with certain skills, such as experience as a manager and supervisor, skills with workflow management and writing documentation, attention to detail and strong organizational skills, and good communication skills. To prepare for the announcement of the position, it was imperative to communicate with staff members in each unit in acquisitions to provide detailed information as to why the units were merging, what impact it may have on each staff member, and to impress upon each staff member that they are vital to the hiring process and encourage them to actively participate in the selection process. Luckily, we were able to find a great candidate for the position, and I will now turn it over to Jennifer Culley, who will discuss leading the change in acquisitions.
My name is Jennifer Culley, and I'm the lead acquisitions librarian at UNLV. I began in October of 2019, and I would like to talk about initiating change in acquisitions and the challenges that we faced since I came on board with merging the continuing resources and one-time resources acquisitions together and how we are addressing them. I will also discuss some of the managerial aspects. Migration to ALMA was completed at the end of 2017, but staff are still learning the system. Cleanup in the system is ongoing. An example of a cleanup project is that some of the order records were set up incorrectly, causing potential problems down the line. There are also training issues to better learn the system and utilize all the available features, including those that allow us to automate more processes, such as electronic data interchange, also known as EDI invoicing, or using the analytics feature to gather, list, and pull statistics. The combining of areas also caused acquisition staff to obtain new duties. Merged into the combined unit was a faculty member whose main job responsibility was to work with electronic resources, a library technician 1 and 2, and a student that worked with all aspects of one-time purchasing of physical materials or ebooks. My position was created to help pull together and lead this newly combined area. An additional student was relocated to acquisitions later as duties from other areas began to shift to the unit. The following duties were or are being added to the staff in the acquisitions unit. Supervision of the new student moved to Library Technician 1. Both acquisitions unit students will be trained to receive standing orders, as well as the Librarian Technicians 1 and 2. Serials claiming and check-in will be moving to the acquisitions unit. Both students will be trained, as well as the Librarian Technicians 1 and 2. Author processing charge invoicing will be moving to acquisitions in late 2020, and for the moment will go to the lead acquisitions librarian. It is also my plan to continue to utilize the students and library technicians 1 and 2 to work on e-resource tasks or projects to maintain a sense of togetherness of these areas and of these staff. This is also a growing resource area. Workflows and processes, along with procedures, are currently under review for updates and edits for ways to streamline and improve efficiency. I am reviewing staff responsibilities and cross-training staff to help with both one-time and continuing resource processing. I'm working to improve collaboration between the acquisitions unit and liaison librarians who have collection development responsibilities. Being a new librarian at UNLV, I began as a very hands-on manager. This allowed me to better learn the processes and procedures that we are currently doing and to more easily see where things can be tweaked or made more efficient. While updating procedures, it has become clear that in Millennium, staff had a process and followed it, but did not really understand what they were doing. I'm working with each staff member individually to find ways to update their procedures to better work with ALMA and eliminate any duplication of tasks. These procedures also extend outside the system and include any other tasks required for their job, such as filing, receiving of materials, or invoice processing. My hope is that walking through processes together will help staff better understand their jobs. We're also working to update procedures for the liaisons to use when submitting orders. We've also already established a new template for use when requesting materials. We recently finished a project that involves scanning and attaching invoices to continuing resource titles for easier access to previous years, and incorporated this into current procedures for newly processed invoices. We're currently in the midst of a project to add the reporting code to each continuing resource that reflects its spend category according to the University Financial Office. This will allow students to assist in putting these codes on invoices, since they will just need to copy them from the records. I'm evaluating additional resources to help us better and more quickly acquire resources, as well as any software that may help streamline processes or work more efficiently, such as central ordering programs such as Real. COVID-19 has added a big twist to the plans that I had for this past year. Additional challenges were introduced as the library closed and staff were sent home to work remotely. Some processes were easy to adapt to remote work, while others were not. Physical material shipments were put on temporary hold for months. Others arrived and sat at the library until staff were allowed to return. Remote work created technology challenges as staff needed scanners, printers, computers, and various software to complete their tasks. Working remotely also created a challenge for access to mail, such as statements and invoices. The projects I had on my to-do list and the additional duties that were to be given to the acquisitions unit were all delayed. Due to the technology issues, I picked up some of the work that my staff were doing, as I had access to equipment that they did not. This impacted other work that I was engaged in. In June, acquisition staff were allowed back in the library on a rotating schedule to promote social distancing. Library work began to shift back to staff that the lead acquisitions librarian had picked up. Shipments that were on hold were released and began to come in, creating a backlog with staff only working 2 to 3 days a week. Allowing student workers to return was challenging as the library was still closed and would remain so until early August. This reduced the help on the processing of physical materials. At this time, quarantining materials became necessary, but further slowed down processing time. What changes may be permanent? We switched to a lot of electronic documentation for processing invoices. A hopeful project down the road will be to get rid of the print invoices that we keep in filing cabinets and acquisitions, since copies are also saved electronically. New projects have arisen from challenges that we faced working remotely, such as one that involved scanning of licenses to put into the library system. Accessing these materials was impossible when we were working remotely. Something good that arose during this time was better communication among the acquisition staff, and I will address this further in a moment. Change can be hard for those who have been in positions for long periods of time and are used to doing things a certain way. I'm very involved in any of the new duties that are coming down to acquisitions, ensuring new tasks have procedures and can provide training if necessary. I ensure that all staff can ask questions and that everyone has clear expectations for their part in whatever new task has come their way. One of my main goals for restructuring acquisitions was to improve communication. Some prior communication issues stemmed from having 2 units performing acquisitions functions, causing confusion as to which unit handled certain situations. This has been cleared up now as everything runs through one unit. If there's confusion, it comes to me, I make the determination, and use that decision as an opportunity to work on procedures and clarify workflow. I have also met one-on-one with the head of the library liaison program, several of the liaisons who report to this position, as well as a liaison librarian from each of the other university libraries to establish a relationship and open up communication regarding acquisitions, questions, or issues. In addition to merging workflow, I had to integrate the people to form one cohesive acquisitions unit. There was no physical relocation of staff, so many of the changes have come in how the unit communicates with one another and with the rest of the library as a whole. We have communicated in a variety of ways in acquisitions. We began with face-to-face group meetings about once a month and face-to-face individual meetings, but most interactions were unscheduled drop-ins for specific questions. I also sent group and individual emails to touch base and keep everyone updated on news gleaned from other meetings that I had attended. Meeting types and frequency changed as a result of COVID-19. We're all working from home or in a hybrid home office schedule. We are now meeting virtually once a week as a group and as necessary for one-on-one meetings. We are also utilizing chat for quick one-on-one conversations, and we're continuing to use emails for group sharing of information as well. In some ways, our communication has gotten better. Training is evolving as we utilize web-based meeting software. We have transitioned from in-person training to sharing computer screens and walking through procedures together. We're also utilizing programs such as Google Docs and Google Sheets for collaborative work. I've been able to get staff buy-in with regards to all of the changes I've made so far. I've been able to accomplish this by providing full transparency regarding changes and any additional work that will be taking place. I also, when possible, work with each staff member to find out what type of impact each change will make to their workflow prior to making any decisions. In addition, I am training with the staff on all of the new duties that were moved from other areas and helping to adjust any procedures that came with them for our new workflow. I then assist as backup for those duties, such as invoice processing. With the increase in transparency and with my engagement of them in decision-making, the staff have really opened up and have begun to participate more in the creation of the newly combined acquisitions unit. From staff suggestions on areas of improvement, we have begun or completed several projects to help streamline workflows or cut down on duplication of tasks, such as how and where we save invoices and entering vendor correspondences and orders. Staff buy-in has made all the changes and increases in duties run fairly smoothly with little pushback from staff. A major result of the restructuring process has been an improvement in communication. Streamlining of processes, particularly of invoice processing, has already happened. The current weekly virtual meetings with all of the staff and acquisitions has allowed us to more easily work through ordering problems or questions, such as who performs what duties. This was a pleasant surprise, and I will likely continue these meetings and frequency even when we return to the library, as social distancing will be around for quite a while longer. We may also continue to use the virtual meetings and collaborations. New ideas have been inspired by our remote work, and we are currently working on video instructions for liaisons to help us save time in their previously in-person training. I also check in frequently with staff to ensure that any changes that we made are going well, or that staff in general are okay, especially during these stressful times.
Although we are happy with having acquisitions in one unit, acquisitions is constantly evolving due to changes in tools and technology and changes to the marketplace. The library will need to keep up to date on these changes and continually seek to improve workflow efficiencies and cost effectiveness. UNLV is now using ALMA, and as ALMA continues to develop and improve, we will need to stay current on the tools and capabilities of the system. ALMA has APIs and other add-ons, and we need to investigate using the APIs and add-ons to see how our workflows can improve. As we use ALMA's technology and tools, we will need to periodically review and update our workflows to improve efficiencies. We want to always improve the unit's performance and have our workflows take less time so users can get access to needed resources as quickly as possible. As we look into tools and software and review and improve workflows, we will have to analyze staff job responsibilities and identify which staff should be taking over new or existing duties. In addition, we have to make certain staff are trained properly so that any transition to new workflows is as seamless as possible. Nevada, like other states, was hit hard economically by COVID. At this time, all positions are frozen, so if a staff member leaves, at this time we cannot replace them. If we happen to lose a staff member, we will have to go through a thorough review of our processes and see how we can use technology or staff members from other units to help with acquisition. As you can see from our presentation, change is exciting, but challenging, and it does take time. It is important to communicate with staff and to get buy-in from them to make the change as easy as possible. Of course, there will be missteps along the way, but if we carefully plan and have a good strategy, the change can be very successful. Thank you for attending the presentation. We are happy to take questions, and if you prefer, we have provided our email information so you can contact us after the presentation.
I'd like to answer a couple questions that have popped up in the chat, if that's okay. It may be quicker than trying to type it. One of the questions was, how many staff do we have? Acquisitions unit right now consists of 2 faculty, myself, and then we have someone who is over electronic resources. And then we have 2 full-time classified staff, a library technician 1 and 2, and 2 students. I check in with my staff. The librarian, who is faculty, I do a little less often. We have a weekly meeting, so I'm checking in once a week on her. And then every other week or so, I send her emails to just kind of see how is workload, how are things going. My other staff, I'm checking in several times a week. There are challenges working from home. So I think that this helps me get a better grip on, how is the workflow going? Are we having technology issues? I'm still working primarily from home, so I know if they're in the office, what do shipments look like? And they've been very open about that. So I think that has helped keep me informed and let them know that I am here if there are issues that arise.
So Jennifer, one of the questions that a person had submitted was, how did you work with staff to accommodate them if they needed more support, from their supervisor during such a lean down time when everyone was very busy?
I had to prioritize the work that I had to do. So when I came in, there were a lot of changes that I knew had to be made. I started a list of things that I wanted to get done. And then when new duties started shifting our way, we ran into issues with technology and additional learning that needed to happen with the staff. And so I pushed some of my projects to the side and I went through hands-on training with the staff. And I learned some new software that I was not that familiar with so that I could actually train them on some of the things that were coming their way. Or if they were having issues with, we're using Google Docs. It's not something that I had used a lot before I came here. Some of the staff had not used it before. So I had to go through and find out, what are they having difficulties with? Can I figure out how to do it? And then can I walk them through the process? So it was a lot of learning on my part. It was very time intensive to go through this with them. And I had to put my projects on the back burner, but I think that it helped them to actually visually see what we were doing instead of reading some of the procedures that came along. And I think that's how we were managing to get through some of these new things to them.
I can speak briefly to that too, sort of like overarching when I first got there and we did a whole bunch of sort of reorganization. I think I want to say I have a magic answer to it, but I don't. Each staff member is kind of individual, and as they take on new responsibilities, they respond to things in different ways. But there were a couple of clear messages that I sent. One is that training was something that was there for anybody. We're very lucky at UNLV, even in these tight budget times where we have a robust training and professional development budget. I encourage supervisors to meet regularly with staff and talk them through their new responsibilities. And I was very clear that there was plenty of time to learn and that everybody was on a learning curve. So it wasn't that, we're giving you new responsibilities and we expect you to pick them up and be successful on day one. It really was that this was a change, this was a reorganization, people were learning new things, and that there was an expectation of growth. I don't have any magic kind of bullets, and different staff responded to things differently, but really it's just sort of trying to find time and being clear about priorities and being clear about goals. What are the divisional priorities? What are the departmental priorities, so that people can know what they're working toward?
Annette, a question just came in.
you talked about the qualities you needed to see in staff to effective positive process role change. In your opinion, what qualities or culture do institutions, libraries need to have to similarly foster this type of positive process or role change?
That's a fantastic question. And it's probably a loaded one too, but I think for me, it's an acceptance of it's a learning culture, right? So as an organization, you need to accept that staff should always be learning, should always be growing, and should always be aiming to learn new things and develop new skills. As we talked about briefly today in technical services, but across all of librarianship, things change. What we do changes, and we need to gain new skills. So I think being in an environment that encourages that and expects that, because sometimes that's a challenge. Sometimes you've got staff, as we have, and probably everybody else has, that's been doing the same thing for 10, 15 years, and learning something new is not where they want to go. So it's a sort of a bit of a carrot and stick between sort of encouraging people to grow and learn, but also setting an expectation that they have to. And as I said, we do provide robust support at UNLV. Training is something that we support professional development. Even all of our faculty have a professional development budget that they can use to attend conferences, but we also support training from what we called our classified staff. So I think that we have sort of an environment where we do encourage training and growth, and we're working on the accountability piece as well, because that's important too. If you're not, if you're not growing, you're not learning, there are issues there. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's kind of what I think.
So another question that came in, and we sort of alluded to it earlier in the chat, was I'd like to hear more about the order records you needed to clean up after the migration. One of the things that I will say is that one of the biggest issues that we ran into was that when we looked at the order records after the migration, for example, we have thousands of electronic journals. They came over as print plus electronic. So we had to change that sort of status as well. In some cases, order record information was missing, and so we had to go back and fill it in. And Jen, did you had posted something, I think, in chat, but I don't know if you're still dealing with some other issues.
Yes, we still have some other ongoing issues. Some of it was procedures. So the procedures appeared to me when I started that they were really for Millennium and not for Alma, but they were applied to Alma. So when materials started coming in, they were given a receive date, but they were not actually received the way Alma would like for you to. So it did not, if I was running a list of things that were on order, they were still showing up because it wasn't properly received. So it wasn't that they migrated incorrectly, it was that procedures came over and were done incorrectly. So these are things that we're still looking at. Some of this stuff we're stumbling across, as we do regular work. Some of it is going to be ongoing, purposefully doing searches of things that I think could potentially be a problem so that we can start working on projects that we will be working on to clean this up in the future. One comment I had to Annette about just the changes with the job responsibilities and getting people on board. Some of the way that I'm approaching it is that, I would like to make this change because it's going to streamline this process. So it's going to save you half the time, but your workflow is going to be a little bit different. So I'm being, very transparent about what I'm doing and trying to emphasize that I'm making this change to make your life easier, to make your job easier, to make things go a little bit more quickly, because I know that more work is coming to you, and I want to make sure that you don't feel overloaded with what you have.
So it looks like we will be kicked out of here in a couple of minutes. So I think, and unless there are any more questions that we didn't get to, yeah, I'm reading the chat at the same time. I can't multitask. If there are any more questions, please feel free to email us. You've got our email there. And yes, the presentation, I'm not quite sure what Charleston is doing with posting the presentations, but we will be posting our presentation. The narration is also on the presentation. So, so that will be shared as part of the conference wrap up. But thanks everybody for attending, and thank you for the great questions. And if we didn't get to them, please email us. Thank you.